Near the river, a pair of photographers are trying to get a good shot of the local birds when they accidentally discover the body of a woman. Meanwhile, top forensic pathologist Kang is finishing teaching another class at the police academy. This is his last semester as a professor because he'll soon be returning tiring to spend more time with his daughter, who was living in the USA. She was supposed to be visiting today, but her trip got delayed. After class is over, Kang is called by the police to look at the body found near the river. There he's surprised to find Detective Men, who used to be a student. Men isn't taken seriously by her peers for being a woman, and she's often relegated to minor tasks. At least this time she finds something useful to get her started: mysterious footprints that she takes pictures. Kang takes a look at the body and finds that it has been dismembered. However, the murderer left all the parts behind together except for an arm. Later, at the police station, they look over the little information they have. The victim is Yuna, a 29-year-old that had been reported missing. Kang asks for theories, and Min thinks the murderer wanted them to find and identify the body. Detective June berates her as usual, thinking this was just some crazy guy with a grudge, but Kang agrees with her and asks her to stay for the autopsy. Kang is cold and methodical with his work, but Men can't stay on the site for long and leaves the room to throw up. Later, Kang gives the cop a summary of the preliminary autopsy. Yuna died from a fractured skull caused by a long, hard object. Soil containing granite was found at her nostrils and mouth, marking the place where she died. There are also signs of salt that indicate she was dismembered by the sea, so the body was moved between the killing and the cutting. Yet the parts were thrown in the river, which adds a third location to the list. Min remembers there's a construction company working on the coastal reclamation project, and their factories are on the seafront. Meanwhile, Yun has found out Yuna used to have a boyfriend, and the cops are divided into teams to follow these two leads. Yun goes around the city asking if anyone has seen the boyfriend and has to arrest multiple gamblers until he comes across Beyond playing the horses. He's taken to the station for interrogation, but Beyond swears he hasn't seen Yuna in a month, and the night of the crime he had been gambling. In the meantime, Mint interviews a few factory managers who swear they are working 24/7 to keep up with order, especially because they keep being harassed by environmental protesters, so it's impossible for a murder to happen there without them seeing it. However, the workers still end up finding the missing arm in the soil. Later in the evening, Min visits Kang at his home to discuss the case, and she's told to open the door with a piece of rope he left there because the electronic lock is broken. After petting Kang's friendly dog, she presents the crime pictures to Kang, who reaches the conclusion the killer is trying to tell them something and that the three locations should have something in common. Afterward, Min stays up late investigating the locations. The next day, she has an extensive report to present that Yoon tries to dismiss, but Chifo gives her a chance. The environmental group I Love Venus has been trying to stop the construction company from destroying the sea and river line. The leader Sung-ho wrote a book comparing the local river to the famous statue of Venus, and the way the government is destroying the river coast to the way Venus had been severed in the past. This damage matches the state of Yuna's body, and the three locations had all been under construction by the same company. The day of the crime, there was a confrontation between the workers and the protesters, so operations were stopped for 20 minutes, leaving enough time for the killer to strike. The leader has a disability that causes him to walk with a cane, which matches the twisted footprint and the little hole in the mud too. Men's research is taken seriously, and she's sent together with Yeon to arrest the leader, Lee Seung-ho, who surrenders himself easily, claiming to have to pay for what he did. Later at the station, Hyun can't get Sung-ho to talk about anything other than the importance of the species living in the river, so it takes over the investigation. She knows Sung-ho's family was one of the many that lost their ships when construction started, which means they also lost their livelihood and had to leave their homes. Shortly after this, Sung-ho's father, Mr. Lee, died and his sister Sujin ended things for herself. Min also revealed she sprayed water outside to take a new footprint from Sung-ho, which matches the one from the scene of the crime. Seeing this evidence, Sung-ho admits to being the killer. Meanwhile, Kang is at the airport waiting for his daughter, but she never arrives. A stranger approaches him to give him an envelope sent by Sung-ho, and inside he finds pictures of his daughter Hee-in tied up. The stranger is already gone, so Kang can't ask him anything. And at that moment, Min calls him to tell him the killer was Sung-ho, the same person that sent the envelope. Kang hurries towards the station while he calls a friend at customs who confirms one did arrive the other day as planned, and the delay had been a lie from the kidnappers. Back in the station, Yun is asking Sung-ho for the details, but he doesn't say anything and only looks at the clock as if waiting for something. Kang arrives then and asks for a moment with Sung-ho, who isn't surprised to see him. His deal is simple: Kang must prove him innocent in 3 days or his daughter will die. Desperate to help Yi-won, Kang rushes to the lab to see what evidence has been found so far. The analyst shows him the blood-covered so they've found, but the DNA test hasn't been done yet. Kang takes a scalpel on his way out and goes home to use it on his dog. He also requests a psychiatric evaluation of the suspect to delay the investigation. Afterward, Kang calls the analyst and asks him to wait for him at the office. With him out of the lab, Kang sneaks inside, washes the saw and covers it with the dog's blood instead. Min also comes to the lab to pick up the test results and finds the analyst in the office. Then Kang shows up and tells the analyst to finish his work before having a chat with Min, saying Sung-ho's limited mobility couldn't have allowed him to kill a person, and the evidence is circumstantial, so they should wait for the report before requesting a warrant. Next, Kang asks for a favor from a cop friend and gets to visit Sung-ho in prison. Wanting proof that his daughter is alive, Sung-ho takes Kang's phone and makes a call, angering Kang when he discovers Sung-ho is only pretending to talk to someone. Kang begins beating Sung-ho up, only to be interrupted by his phone ringing. It's Jaewon who asks her father for help before the call is cut off. Then Kang asks Sung-ho to tell him where the murder weapon is, but he refuses and asks Kang to think about why he killed the girl instead. The next moves to break into Yuna's home. Kang finds a business card and makes a call to meet Ari, a friend of the victims. She doesn't recognize Sung-ho and explains there weren't men in Yuna's life except for Bing-do, who was just a harasser and not an actual boyfriend. The next morning, the analyst gives Min the test results and they're shocked to see the blood on the saw belonged to a dog. Later at the station, Chief O is furious by this development, so he demands the team to find the murder weapon ASAP. However, Min is being shamed for her failure and asked to stay behind with the paperwork. Meanwhile, Kang is trying to find Bing-do. When Min calls him to ask for the autopsy report, he pretends he stayed at home because he was sick. While talking to her, Kang sees Beyond-do on the street and gets ready to catch him. But then Min mentions the cops are looking for the murder weapon and Kang decides to take care of that first. Driving like a maniac, Khan manages to arrive at Sung-ho's house first and finds a picture of him with Park, the stranger from the airport. At that moment, the police arrive, so Kang runs to hide, accidentally dropping the scalpel on the way. The cops pick up the scalpel and find a crowbar with blood outside, taking it as the murder weapon. In the meantime, Min goes to Kang's house to check on him. Since he won't answer the bell, she gets inside by pulling the rope and finds the dog, who has a bandage around its blood-covered leg. Min takes the dog to the vet, who tells her the wound is a cut from a particularly sharp knife, perhaps a scalpel. The location of the wound indicates it's been made on purpose back to Kang. He goes to the local police station to send the picture to a police friend, but a cop there recognizes the boys and gives him the information he needs. Park was an orphan that Mr. Lee took in. He and Sung-ho grew up as brothers. Park and Sung-ho's sister, Soo-jin, had been dating, but after she died, they moved out of town. Kang goes to the Lis abandoned childhood house by the river, and while most of it is empty, breaking into a locked room comes with a shocking discovery. The walls are covered with pictures of Yuna and Hyun. There also are old news articles about a student that had been attacked by 3 boys from wealthy family, but these boys were declared innocent at that moment. Park arrives at the house and sees Kang, causing him to run away. Kang goes after him and gets hit by a car in the process, so by the time he reaches Park, he's too weak to fight. Park beats him up and reminds him to play by the rules before knocking him out. When he wakes up, Kang returns to the station, remembering the night his daughter got sick, and punches the mirror in anger. Later, Min is asked to take the scalpel to the lab, and she remembers what the vet said. She asks the analyst if the lab was ever empty, and he points out the night Kang had asked him to come to the office. Then Min searches the office, finding the broken mirror and the picture of Sung-ho with Park. In the meantime, Kang visits Sung-ho and confesses he's finally remembered who he is. The abused girl from the newspaper articles was Sung-ho's sister, Soo-jin, and Kang's testimony about the autopsy report had helped the criminals get free. He explains he only did his job back then, and that now the cops have the murder weapon, so Kang can't do anything to help Sung-ho anymore. However, Sung-ho still refuses to break the deal and tells him to find a way. Meanwhile, the detectives discover that the crowbar isn't the actual murder weapon because the blood on it doesn't match Yoon's and the thickness doesn't match the wound either. After the Sung-ho visit is over, Kang bumps into Min, who tries to arrest him for tampering with evidence. Kang explains his daughter is in trouble, but leaves without giving Min any more information. Min decides to research Kang and discovers his involvement in Soo-jin's case. Not only Kang had been in charge of the autopsy, Yuna had been one of the witnesses. Min tries to talk to Sung-ho about it, but he only tells her not to trust Kang before giving her his cane, claiming it's the real murder weapon. In the meantime, Kang finds Beyond-do again and calls a Reed to help him with a plan. Ari approaches Baeongdu to have a drink with him at a bar and then takes him to a hotel room where they spent a few hours together. Kang retrieves the glass Baeongdu used and rebrands him beyond Do Si before accepting her pay, although she did this because she wants revenge for Yuna. Suddenly, Kang is approached by Min, who received a call from Park to tell her about Kang's whereabouts. However, Park shows up as well and knocks Min out to give Kang time to finish his plan. While Min is taken to a hospital, Kang returns to the lab to finally do the autopsy report. He plants Beyond-Du's fingerprint and seed inside the body. Thus, his final report makes him look like the killer. While working, he remembers the trial of Soo-jin's case, where Yuna had testified that she saw Soo-jin with the boys and she had looked like she was having fun. Such testimony made Mr. Lee cry out in the middle of the trial because they were sullying his daughter's name. Then Kang testified that there hadn't been any torn tissue found in the body, so there wasn't any proof of violence or force. These two testimonies made the judge decide that the three boys were innocent. By the time the detectives try to prosecute Sengo, he's following Kang's plan and has gotten himself a lawyer. That explains his confession had been done under duress, and he's now taking it back. The cane matched the shape of the wound, but it didn't have blood on it, and the footprints can be explained by the fact Song-ho lives in the area, so they can't be used as proof either. Then the autopsy report arrives, and the detectives have no choice but to let Sun-ho go and arrest Beyond-Du instead. When Sung-go leaves the station, Park picks him up and Kang follows them to their house. At the hospital, a friend of Mint's brings her some information. In Soo-jin's case, 2 different autopsy reports had been used, and one of them did include tissue damage, which means Kang gave false testimony. It wouldn't be surprising if the boys' wealthy parents paid the witnesses off because the whole case had been a mess. Speaking of the boys, they're all dead now, and by adding Yuna to the list, men suspects Kang is next. She leaves the hospital to look for Kang and asks her coworkers to dispatch a unit to Soho's house. However, when she looks at the picture again while waiting at the stoplights, she remembers the abandoned childhood home by the river and decides to go there instead. At Sung-ho's house, Kang shows up to apologize for Soo-jin and demands to know where his daughter is. Sung-ho doesn't buy the apology and hits him for sullying his sister's name, causing Kang to remember what else happened that day. He-won had been sick with a rare illness that required her to go to the USA for treatment. In order to pay for it, Kang accepted the bribe from the boy's parents to change his testimony. Mr. Lee had approached Kang to ask for mercy, but Kang ignored him while a young Sung-ho watched from afar back to the present. Kang asked Sung-ho to kill him instead of his daughter, as Sung-ho explains how much hatred he grew up with because everyone in town thought his sister was at heart. So it's too late for Kang to ask for mercy for his daughter. Furious, Kang jumps on Sung-ho and beats him up until he confesses the location of Jan. Kang drives out at a high speed, almost crashing against the detective unit. On his way, Min arrives at the river house and is found by Park, who tries to kill her, so Min must shoot him in self-defense. She also finds the disturbing revenge Sung-ho has prepared for Kang. When the professor arrives at the river house, Min tries to warn him not to go inside, but he doesn't listen and searches the rooms for his daughter. Kyun is found lying down on a pile of rose petals, but when Kang tries to pick her up, she discovers her body is missing and only her head and limbs are there. It turns out she's been dead all along and the messages he's heard had been recorded before she got killed. The reason why her body isn't there is that it had been used to replace Yuna's. Thus, Kang's autopsy and evidence tampering had been done on his own daughter. While Kang suffers in despair, Sung-ho shows up to tell him. Now he knows the pain he's gone through. Furious, Kang steals Men's gun and shoots Sung-ho, claiming that's what he wanted. However, Kang can't forgive himself now, so he uses the gun again, this time on himself. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.